Should you pull Aemeath or should you skip? After reading her kit, Aemeath feels like Kuro's attempt at perfecting all of their combat systems into one unit. She has the transformations of Kartathea, the different states of dealing damage like Lene, being able to utilize negative statuses without removing their stacks thankfully, unlike Zanny, Augusta levels of liberation management, and Frolova's ability to deal massive AoE or single target damage. Aemeath really is the full package, but it comes at a cost, and that cost is her need for two different teams in order to complete her different functions, either one for massive single target damage or one for massive multi-target damage. This makes her both flexible and restrictive, but everything entirely depends on how well each of these teams perform compared to each other on her release. I'm going to break down in very simple terms how Aemeath kit operates, who you'll want to use to make her work, and what her future potential holds. It's important to note that she is a liberation damage dealer, okay? So keep that in mind. Let's take a better look at what's going on because there is a lot of resource management in Aemeath's kit. Aemeath's Forte circuit is referred to as her synchronization rate and has a max total of 200 points. You generate synchronization rate by dealing different attacks. Her intro, her liberation, heavy attack, and certain basic attacks all generate synchronization points. Noticeably, she has two stages in her heavy attack. You can hold her heavy for longer to unlock a level 2 that gives 200 synchronization points. She also generates something called resonance rate points that sits as stars above her Forte circuit, and you can generate a maximum of 4 resonance rate points. You gain 1 point of resonance rate every time you used an enhanced skill or liberation. Introing into Aemeath puts her in the Star Loom acceleration state for 15 seconds, and that will make her first liberation gain an additional point of resonance rate. Aemeath's resonance skill allows her to transform into her mech state and deal different attacks, but once you reach 100 synchronization points, the enhanced resonance skill, called the enhanced sync attack, is unlocked. Once triggered, 100 points are consumed and the mech will deal additional instances of damage depending on what resonance mode she is in for either Toon Rupture or for Fusion Burst. It's important to note that both Aemeath and the mech version can build up synchronization rate, and no matter what, as soon as you hit 100 synchronization rate, you can use an enhanced skill to transform Aemeath into the mech or the mech into Aemeath. That's why you have Seraphic Duet Overture or Seraphic Duet Encore. It just depends which version you're switching into. Like Augusta, Aemeath has two stages to her liberation, Heavenfall Edict. The first liberation stage is Overdrive. Once triggered, you enter the Heavenfall Unbound state. Aemeath transforms into the mech and deals fusion damage. She also enters Stardust Resonance, which allows her to deal more damage in her enhanced resonance skills. Being in the Unbound state also unlocks her second phase of her liberation, which is called Heavenfall Edict Finale, which can only be triggered when you have 200 total synchronization points and 4 points of resonance rate. This is the liberation that summons the Exostrider to deal big PP damage. This attack resets all synchronization and resonance points. It's important to note that once you have 4 points of resonance rate, she enters the instant response state, where she can instantly cast her level 2 charged heavy attack and instantly gain 200 synchronization points. You can see where this is going. So this is roughly how Aemeath works. You intro, do basic attacks until you get 100 synchronization points, use her enhanced skill, then gain a resonance rate point and enter the mech. You liberate, enter her Heavenfall Edict Unbound state and gain another resonance rate, plus an additional one thanks to the intro skill. You basic attack in the mech form until you get her enhanced thinking skill again and switch back to Aemeath. You now have 4 resonance rate points, which allows you to instant cast the heavy attack stage 2, gain 200 synchronization points, so you can trigger her second liberation, Heavenfall Edict Finale, Bob's your uncle, and you can outro. That's quite a mouthful, but it's pretty straightforward when you put it in practice. The key is the first liberation, Heavenfall Overdrive, which allows her enhanced skills to deal huge amounts of damage thanks to being in the Stardust Resonance state. So let's talk about just how the different resonance modes affect her enhanced skills. First, just like Lene, Aemeath can utilize 2 different resonance modes in order to deal different kinds of damage, and thus she can utilize 2 wildly different team setups. We'll talk about teams later, but her first resonance mode is Tune Rupture. Every time a resonator responds to the Tune Rupture interfered state, 10 stacks of Ruptuous Trail is inflicted on the target for 30 seconds, up to 30 times. When you use the resonance skill Seraphic Duet, the Ruptuous Trail stacks are removed, and there is a 4% multiplier for 2.5 seconds to your Tune Rupture damage for each Ruptuous Trail stack removed. This means there is a maximum of 120% damage multiplication for Tune Rupture damage. The resonance skill Seraphic Duet also deals 5 instances of Tune Rupture damage to 5 random enemies, so really it's a 120% damage multiplier 5 different times. If the skill is cast while in Stardust Resonance state, which is applied after her first liberation, you additionally deal 10 instances of Tune Rupture damage, so there is a maximum potential of dealing 15 instances of Tune Rupture damage with a 120 damage multiplier, and this is why this mode excels at doing single target damage. If you are only faced with one enemy, you are able to guarantee all those 5 instances of Tune Break damage are applied to one random enemy, along with the additional 10 while you're in the Stardust mode, and not spread across 5 random ones in a multi-target scenario. Her second resonance mode is Fusion Burst. When a resonator inflicts Fusion Burst, 1 stack of Fusion Trail is also inflicted for 30 seconds, stacking up to 30 times. 1 stack of Fusion Burst will be constantly reapplied if the stacks reach 0. Once Fusion Burst reaches 5 stacks, it gets triggered and deals damage, and the stacks of Fusion Burst are removed. But if you use her enhanced skill, the Fusion Burst stacks that you have is triggered, but the stacks remain. The Fusion Trail stacks are consumed and removed, and there is a 10% damage multiplier for every Fusion Trail stack that is removed, which is a maximum damage multiplier of 300% for your Fusion Burst damage. While you are in Stardust Resonance mode, again after triggering your first liberation, the enhanced skill also deals an additional 200% damage multiplier to Fusion Burst damage, so in total, Fusion Burst can have a damage multiplier of up to 500% as it is stackable. Because Fusion Burst is applied to multiple targets, this mode is going to excel at dealing with multi-target fights. Now, if 2 resources wasn't enough with her synchronization rate points and resonance rate points, she actually has a 3rd resource called Starflux. This is capped at 600 points. It regenerates on its own over time, but it's slower in combat. While Aemeath is in her mech form, Starflux can be used to fly by using the utility button so long as she has more than 200 points of Starflux. And that's it. It's just what lets her fly in her mech. So, what about her outro? It changes depending on which resonance mode Aemeath is in. For Tune Rupture, all resonators except Aemeath gain 10% damage amplification for 20 seconds. This is increased to 20% to resonators who inflict Tune Rupture shifting on an enemy. For Fusion Burst, all resonators except Aemeath gain 10% damage amplification for 20 seconds. This is increased to 20% to resonators who inflict Fusion Burst. This is important because currently there are no other characters other than Aemeath who will be able to inflict Fusion Burst, which means her best fusion support is yet to release. Aemeath, like every resonator, has 2 inherent skills. The first gives her instant response heavy attack a 200% damage amplification, which is nice. The second inherent skill increases her crit damage. In her Tune Rupture resonance mode, every resonator that inflicts Tune Rupture increases Aemeath's crit damage by 20%. This can stack 3 times and triggered once per resonator. In her Fusion Burst resonance mode, every resonator that inflicts Fusion Burst increases Aemeath's crit damage by 30%, stacking 2 times and triggered once per resonator. The second liberation, Heavenfall Edict, also gains a 25% damage amp once max stacks for either team is reached. So this brings us to the team section of Aemeath. For Toon Rupture to perform at its maximum, you want a full team of resonators that can interact with Rupture, which is Mornay and Lene, because you need the 3 different resonators to get the full crit damage buff. But for Fusion Burst to perform at its maximum, you want an additional resonator along with Aemeath that can inflict Fusion Burst. And on her release, there will be no other character other than her that could do so. So her best fusion support is likely upcoming and will probably be Lucilla. She will likely be the Chikonura Fusion Burst application. But until then, your best bet is likely to be Chisa for the Fusion Burst stack doubling and Lupa, which gives fusion damage amplification. But this means that Aemeath's Fusion Burst Resonance mode is likely to be significantly weaker on release. But Kuro has provided us with plenty of fusion characters to fill the gaps if you didn't pick up either Mornay or Lene to enable her Rupture mode. But in short, if you have Mornay or Lene, congrats, you'll likely have the highest damage output team for now. We'll just have to wait and see comparatively the Fusion Burst teams perform. They should be enough to get through endgame. The damage ceiling for Aemeath when she has a perfect team lineup is crazy high. She really does put in the notion of power creep into question. But should you pull or should you skip Aemeath? I think it's pretty clear that pulling for Aemeath is going to be a huge buff for anyone's account. If you have a lot of fusion characters, she's going to be great. If you have Mornay and Lene, she's absolutely going to be a stellar choice for you. So she's definitely a worthwhile pick if you have a bunch of fusion and you have, you know, Mornay and Lene. So I think you can't really go wrong. You really can't go wrong. I think my only hang-ups of Aemeath is going to be how different is the single target versus like AoE sort of stuff doing, how that damage does comparatively. Are you going to be able to use the fusion stuff on the single target bosses? Is that going to be as effective, or is it going to be the case where Kuro is kind of like restricting people to having to have 2 different teams built for like one character like this? We'll see, we'll find out. We don't know. The only way we're going to find out is on her release when we can test it for ourselves. So we'll see and we'll find out. So if you appreciate this kind of content, hey, listen, I don't really do kit analysis that often, but I'm gonna be real. I had such a fun time going through this myself, understanding it and talking about it, writing the script, everything. So this is kind of cool. So if you want more breakdowns and analysis from me, hey, oh my god, this is the what cap guide arc. What is happening? Make sure to give a like, comment down below if you want more of it. It would mean the world to me. And subscribe, more importantly. I appreciate it. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.